Silence can be louder than screams. In a world ruled by threats, guns, and bloodshed, there was one man who understood a deeper truth. Real power never rushes, never explodes, and never begs to be seen. It waits, it watches, and when the moment arrives, it speaks only once. Tonight you will witness a humiliation that was never forgiven, a rival who believed public disrespect was a show of strength, and a response so quiet, so calculated, that it forced an entire world to bow its head. As you listen, reflect on this question and leave your thoughts in the comments. What hurts more, a violent blow or a calm look that promises consequences? If stories about power, honor, family, and silent authority resonate with you, take a moment now to subscribe, leave a like, and share your perspective in the comments. Your voice matters here. The insult did not come through bullets or open war. That would have been easy to understand, even expected. Instead, it came wrapped in laughter, delivered in front of witnesses designed to humiliate rather than destroy. A rival family, ambitious and impatient, crossed a line that few dared to approach. They mocked the Corleone name in public. They questioned the dignity of Don Vito's blood. They allowed rumors to circulate that his family was weakening, that age had dulled his instincts, that the era of respect was ending. To many men, such provocation demanded an immediate response. Violence would have restored pride, at least on the surface. But Don Vito Corleone was not like many men. He understood that reacting too quickly was a form of surrender. To answer noise with noise was to lower oneself to the level of the offender. So he did what terrified his enemies the most. He did nothing, at least nothing that could be seen. Behind closed doors, his mind was already at work. Don Vito did not raise his voice. He did not issue threats. He listened. He observed who laughed, who stayed silent, and who looked away. Every gesture was remembered. Every word was weighed. He knew that humiliation, when left unanswered in the moment, grows into fear in the hearts of those who delivered it. They begin to wonder not if retaliation will come, but how. The rival believed silence was weakness. They mistook patience for decline. In their arrogance, they continued to push boundaries, subtle insults, strategic disrespect, whispered doubts planted among allies. Each move was meant to corner the Corleone family, to force them into a reaction that could justify open conflict. But Don Vito had already chosen a different path, a path where revenge would not be loud, but absolute. For Don Vito, family was not a banner waved for sentiment. It was a responsibility carved into his identity. An insult to his family was not a personal offense. It was an attempt to fracture the moral order he had built over decades. And moral order, once threatened, must be restored with precision, not rage. He believed that fear fades, but shame endures. And he intended for his rival to feel shame in front of the same world that had witnessed the insult. Quietly, favors were called in. Debts long forgotten were gently reminded. Business routes shifted. Alliances cooled. Invitations disappeared. Doors that once opened effortlessly were now closed without explanation. The rival family began to feel resistance everywhere, yet could not trace its source. Contracts dissolved. Protection vanished. Friends became distant. What they did not realize was that none of this required violence. It required memory, influence, and the discipline to wait. Don Vito never confronted them. He never acknowledged the insult publicly. That was the cruelty of it. By refusing to respond directly, he denied them the satisfaction of recognition. In his world, acknowledgement was power, and he withheld it completely. The rival was left shouting into silence, uncertain whether they were being punished or simply forgotten, a fate far worse for men who craved attention. As pressure mounted, fear crept in. The same men who once laughed now whispered among themselves. They searched for reassurance and found none, because Don Vito's strength was never in domination, but in structure. He had built a system where respect was currency, and once withdrawn, nothing functioned as it should. The humiliation they had delivered was being returned, piece by piece, without a single public confrontation. And this was only the beginning. The rival family sensed that something was wrong, but could not name it. Their power had not been attacked openly. No shots were fired. No warnings delivered. Yet the air around them had changed. Respect, once assumed, now had to be requested, and even then it did not come. Meetings ended without results. Longtime partners hesitated before returning calls. Men who once stood shoulder to shoulder now avoided eye contact, afraid of being seen in the wrong place at the wrong time. Don Vito Corleone watched all of this from a distance. He understood that collapse begins internally, long before it becomes visible. A family does not fall because of an enemy's strength, but because doubt corrodes loyalty from within. His revenge was not designed to crush bodies, but to fracture confidence. He wanted his rival to question every decision, every alliance, every smile offered in their direction. Within the Corleone household, nothing appeared unusual. There were no celebrations, no declarations of victory. Don Vito insisted on normalcy. Meals were shared. Conversations remained measured. This was deliberate. To him, discipline was the foundation of authority. Emotion was never allowed to lead action. Those closest to him trusted that if silence continued, it was because silence was working. The rival, however, grew desperate. They began to seek validation, pushing harder, speaking louder, trying to provoke a reaction that never came. They believed that forcing Don Vito to respond would restore balance. But balance, as he saw it, had already shifted. Every attempt to escalate only revealed their impatience, their lack of control, and nothing exposed weakness faster than the inability to wait. Behind the scenes, Don Vito's influence expanded quietly. Neutral parties were reminded of past kindnesses. Decisions were nudged rather than demanded. He never framed his actions as punishment. That was essential. Punishment invites resistance. Consequences, when presented as natural outcomes, invite submission. Men accepted new arrangements not because they feared Don Vito, but because aligning with him felt inevitable. The rival family's leadership began to fracture. Some members argued for apology. Others pushed for confrontation. Trust eroded. Meetings turned into accusations. Each man suspected the other of secret deals, of quiet betrayal. Don Vito needed none of them to betray their family directly. He only needed them to believe that betrayal was possible. Suspicion did the rest. The humiliation that once seemed like a triumph now felt reckless. What had been laughter turned into regret. They realized too late that Don Vito had never defended his family publicly because he did not need to. In his world, respect was enforced through absence, not presence. When protection disappears, when opportunities vanish, when influence dries up, men understand their place without being told. At one point, an intermediary approached Don Vito, cautiously probing for reconciliation. The message was indirect, carefully worded, full of hesitation. Don Vito listened without interruption. When the man finished, Don Vito responded with calm politeness, neither accepting nor rejecting the overture. He simply spoke of timing, of patience, of the importance of understanding one's position before asking for forgiveness. The message was clear without ever being stated. Kneeling comes before mercy. The rival family now felt exposed. Their earlier confidence had evaporated. Publicly, they maintained a facade of control, but privately, fear dictated every move. They were learning the cost of humiliation delivered to the wrong man. Don Vito did not erase enemies. He reshaped them. He allowed them to exist long enough to feel the weight of their own mistake. And as pressure tightened, a moment approached where silence alone would no longer suffice, not because Don Vito had lost control, but because the lesson was ready to be completed. The turning point did not arrive with an explosion, but with exhaustion. The rival family had spent months reacting to shadows, chasing explanations that never revealed themselves. Their resources were stretched thin, not by war, but by uncertainty. Every decision felt risky. Every alliance felt temporary. In trying to prove they were still powerful, they exposed how fragile they had become. Don Vito understood that humiliation reaches its deepest form when a man is forced to acknowledge his weakness without being told. That moment was approaching. Carefully, he allowed a single opportunity to surface, not as a threat, but as an opening. A gathering was announced, neutral ground, no accusations, no confrontations, just business. Attendance was optional, but absence would speak louder than presence. The rival family knew what it meant. To attend was to submit to the possibility of judgment. To refuse was to confirm irrelevance. They arrived with guarded expressions, surrounded by men who no longer looked confident, only alert. Their posture revealed what their words tried to hide. Fear had replaced ambition. Don Vito arrived last, as he always did, not to assert dominance, but to remind everyone that he operated on his own time. He acknowledged no one immediately. He took his seat, adjusted himself slowly, and waited for the room to settle. Silence followed him, not because he demanded it, but because no one dared to break it. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no anger. That was the most unsettling part. He spoke of balance, of order, of the cost of careless words. He never mentioned the insult. He never named the humiliation. Everyone understood without hearing it. His restraint forced the rival family to relive their mistake internally, in front of men whose respect they had already lost. The rival leader attempted to speak. His words were rehearsed, cautious, stripped of arrogance. He spoke of misunderstandings, of the need for unity, of shared interests. Don Vito listened, his expression unchanged. When the man finished, Don Vito responded with a single observation: respect, once damaged, does not return through explanation. It returns through behavior. That sentence carried more weight than any threat. It reframed the entire situation. There would be no forgiveness ceremony, no dramatic reconciliation, only a long path of obedience, humility, and silence. The rival family understood what was being demanded of them, even if it was never openly stated. They would kneel not physically, but socially, economically, and symbolically. From that moment forward, the hierarchy was restored. Decisions flowed through the Corleone network again. The rival family became cautious participants rather than challengers. They spoke less. They asked more. Their presence diminished. This was not exile, but containment. Don Vito believed that a visible enemy can inspire rebellion, but a subdued one inspires compliance. What made the revenge complete was its invisibility. Outsiders saw no violence, no dramatic downfall. They only noticed a shift. The rival name no longer commanded attention. Their influence faded quietly. Men stopped mentioning them unless necessary. That was the final humiliation, to exist, but without weight. Within the Corleone family, nothing changed. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of victory. Don Vito returned home and resumed his routine. To him, restoring order was not triumph. It was duty. His family had been humiliated, and now they were secure again. That was enough. But beneath the surface, a deeper lesson had been delivered to everyone watching. Power does not announce itself. It reveals itself through consequences. And those who mistake silence for weakness eventually discover how heavy silence can become when it turns against them. The story, however, does not end with submission alone, because the true impact of Don Vito's revenge was not what it did to his rival, but what it taught the world around him. The aftermath spread quietly, like a change in the tide that only seasoned sailors can sense. No one spoke openly about what had happened, yet everyone adjusted their behavior accordingly. Conversations became more careful. Jokes lost their edge. Men chose their words with renewed discipline. The humiliation of the rival family had transformed into a warning written between the lines of every interaction. Don Vito Corleone never claimed credit for this shift. He did not need to. Influence that must be declared is already weakening. Instead, he focused on reinforcing the principles that had guided him from the beginning. Order was not maintained through fear alone, but through predictability. When people know where they stand, they behave. Chaos only thrives where uncertainty is allowed to grow unchecked. The rival family, now subdued, became a living example of consequence. Their leaders learned to speak only when invited. Their requests were modest, their ambitions carefully restrained. They had not been destroyed, and that mercy carried its own burden. To live under another man's tolerance is a constant reminder of past failure. Don Vito understood that mercy, when paired with memory, can be heavier than punishment. Within private circles, others began to reinterpret Don Vito's character. They had long seen him as calm, reserved, almost gentle in his manner. Now they understood that gentleness was not weakness but restraint. His true strength lay in knowing exactly how far to go and when to stop. That balance kept his power stable, while others burned themselves out chasing dominance. Don Vito often reflected on this silently. He believed that men reveal themselves most clearly when given freedom. His rival had revealed impatience, ego, and insecurity. Those flaws had written their downfall long before he intervened. All he had done was allow those traits to reach their natural conclusion. Family remained the axis of every decision. Protecting his name was inseparable from protecting his blood. But protection did not mean constant aggression. It meant creating a world where threats dissolved before they could take shape, where humiliation was answered not with rage, but with inevitability. Don Vito wanted his children to inherit a legacy of stability, not endless war. The rival family now existed in a state of perpetual caution. Every success felt temporary. Every gain required approval, explicit or implied. They had learned that survival under Don Vito's shadow required discipline they had never possessed before. Their earlier laughter echoed only in memory. Now stripped of confidence and pride, others noticed and adapted. Ambitious men recalibrated their strategies. Younger leaders learned that the fastest path to ruin was impatience disguised as bravery. Don Vito's response had redrawn the boundaries of acceptable behavior without issuing a single decree. That was governance at its most refined. Yet Don Vito knew that lessons, no matter how well delivered, must be reinforced by time. Power is not a moment. It is a condition that must be maintained. He remained watchful, not suspicious, but aware. He trusted structure more than emotion, systems more than individuals. That trust had allowed him to turn humiliation into submission without raising his voice. And as the world adjusted to the restored order, the final meaning of his revenge became clear, not in the kneeling of his rival, but in the silence that followed, a silence that spoke of understanding rather than fear. That silence would carry into the final reflection, where the true legacy of Don Vito Corleone reveals itself not as dominance, but as enduring authority. In the end, Don Vito Corleone proved that true revenge does not seek applause, nor does it crave spectacle. What began as an act of humiliation against his family concluded as a lesson etched into the collective memory of everyone who witnessed the shift in power. The rival did not fall in flames or blood. They fell into awareness, forced to recognize that authority grounded in honor, patience, and moral clarity outlasts any momentary display of arrogance. Don Vito never demanded that anyone kneel, yet they did so willingly, not with their bodies, but with their behavior, their restraint, and their silence. His legacy was not built on fear alone, but on the understanding that respect is the only currency that never loses value. And so, while others chased power by shouting louder or striking harder, Don Vito remained unmoved, knowing that the strongest men do not need to prove their strength. They simply endure, and the world eventually adjusts itself around them.